The Wire is a story about cops investigating and trying to catch drug dealers in Baltimore. Baltimore is not presented as a place where one good cop can fix everything or where one evil criminal is the source of all the pain. The show is more honest than that. It shows the police department, the drug trade, the ports, City Hall, the schools, and the media, and slowly it becomes clear that they all behave in similar ways. They protect themselves first. They punish anyone who threatens the machine. They care more about numbers, appearances, and survival than they care about people. The first season begins with Jimmy McNulty looking at a murder trial involving the Barksdale organization. D'Angelo Barksdale is on trial, and everyone knows what happened, but the witness changes her story. The case falls apart. McNulty is bothered by it, not only because D'Angelo walks, but because the entire court system seems to accept that this is just how things are. He talks to Judge Phelan, and that one act of disobedience creates the major crimes detail. From the beginning, McNulty is not framed as a clean hero. He is smart and he cares about the case, but he is also arrogant, selfish, and destructive. He wants to prove he is right as much as he wants justice. That matters because The Wire does not let good intentions make a person pure. McNulty can be right about the case and still be wrong in the way he treats people. That is one of the first honest things the show does. The police begin investigating Avon Barksdale, who controls a major part of the drug trade in West Baltimore. At first, the department barely understands who Avon is. They know the bodies are connected, but they do not know the structure. Avon is almost invisible. He is careful, protected, and respected. Stringer Bell, his second in command, handles the business side with a colder and more disciplined mind. D'Angelo runs the low rise towers and tries to live inside a world he is not fully built for. The wiretap becomes the main weapon of the investigation. The cops are not just chasing corner boys anymore. They are listening, mapping relationships, and slowly learning how the organization works. Lester Freeman becomes one of the most important figures in this part of the story because he understands that real police work is patient. He does not care about easy arrests. He follows money, phones, names, and routines. He sees the system beneath the surface. On the street side, the show spends serious time with the people selling drugs, especially D'Angelo, Wallace, Bodie, and Poot. This is where the show becomes more than a crime story. Wallace is young, sensitive, and clearly not built for the violence around him. When he helps identify Brandon, Omar's boyfriend, he becomes part of something he cannot emotionally carry. Brandon is tortured and killed, and Wallace breaks under the guilt. Wallace's story is one of the first major warnings in the show. The game does not only kill people who lose fights, it kills people who still have a conscience. Wallace tries to leave, but the world does not give him a clean exit. Stringer decides he is a liability. Bodie and Poot, who are also still basically kids, are sent to kill him. The scene is devastating because it does not look like powerful criminals making a dramatic move. It looks like children being forced to destroy another child because the system they live in has already decided what they are supposed to become. By the end of season 1, the police do get Avon. They build a real case, but it is incomplete. Stringer survives. The deeper money connections are protected. The politicians and higher ups do not want the investigation to go too far because it might touch people who are useful or embarrassing. Daniels is punished for doing the work too well. McNulty is sent to the Marine unit. The case closes, but the machine remains. That is the real ending of season 1. The cops win just enough to call it a win, but not enough to change anything. The Barksdale organization is damaged, not destroyed. The police department protects its own image. The city moves on. The first season tells us that truth can be found, but finding it does not mean the system will allow it to matter. Season 2 looks like a different show at first, but it is really the same story from a wider angle. The focus moves to the docks and the working class world of Frank Sabatka. This is important because The Wire is saying that the drug trade does not come from nowhere. It grows in the empty spaces left behind when real work disappears. Frank Sabatka is the treasurer of the Stevedores Union. He is not a clean man, but he is not a simple villain either. He is trying to keep his union alive in a dying port. The work is disappearing. The younger men do not have the future their fathers had. The docks are rotting, and Frank knows it. So he starts taking money from smugglers. He tells himself it is for the union, for the men, for the canal project, for one last chance to bring work back. That is what makes Frank tragic. He is corrupt, but his corruption comes from desperation. He is not trying to become rich like a drug kingpin. He is trying to hold up a world that has already been abandoned. The problem is that once he makes a deal with people like the Greeks, he is no longer in control of what he has invited in. The dead women in the shipping container become the central case of the season. They are smuggled into Baltimore and suffocate because of greed and negligence. Their deaths connect the port to a larger international criminal network. The Greeks are not like Avon. They are less emotional, less visible, and less attached to the city. They move drugs, people, and money through systems that are bigger than Baltimore. If Avon represents local power, the Greeks represent global crime. They are harder to touch because they do not need to be known. Ziggy Sabatka, Frank's son, becomes one of the clearest examples of a person crushed by the gap between who he wants to be and who he actually is. He wants respect. He wants to be seen as tough, clever, and important, but he is not built for the criminal world. Every attempt he makes to prove himself makes him look smaller. When he finally kills someone, it is not a rise into power. It is a collapse. He ruins his life because he cannot survive the humiliation of being himself. Nick Sabatka, Frank's nephew, is more capable, but his path is not much better. He enters the drug trade because the legitimate world has nothing solid to offer him. That is the season's point. The streets are not just a moral failure. They are an economic answer to a city that stopped providing decent answers. Meanwhile, D'Angelo Barksdale is in prison, and his story continues quietly. He begins to separate himself from the life he was born into. He sees more clearly what Avon and Stringer are. He does not want to keep pretending. That makes him dangerous to Stringer. Stringer arranges D'Angelo's death in prison and makes it look like suicide. Avon does not know at first. This betrayal becomes one of the cracks that will eventually destroy their partnership. Frank also tries to cooperate when he realizes how serious everything has become, but the Greeks find out before he can fully help the police. He goes to meet them, still thinking he can explain himself or protect his family, and he is killed. The season ends with the docks still dying. The union is finished. The Greeks escape. The police get pieces of the case, but the larger network survives. Season 2 is telling us that the drug corner and the working dock are connected. They are both parts of the same broken city. One is illegal, one used to be respectable, but both are shaped by the same disappearance of opportunity. The show is not saying crime is excusable. It is saying crime becomes easier to understand when every honest path has been weakened. Season 3 returns to the Barksdale organization, but now the focus is on reform, power, and the impossibility of changing a system from inside it. Stringer Bell is trying to move beyond the street. He wants to become a businessman. He takes economics classes, works with developers, and tries to make the drug trade operate with less violence. He believes that if he can remove emotion from the game, he can turn crime into business. But Stringer misunderstands both worlds. On the street, he is not as feared as Avon. In the legitimate business world, he is not respected. He thinks he is becoming smarter than the game, but he is really entering another game where men in suits rob him more politely. Avon, on the other hand, understands the street completely. He knows reputation matters, territory matters, violence matters. He does not pretend to be something else. That is why the conflict between Avon and Stringer is so strong. Stringer wants evolution. Avon wants the crown he understands. Neither man can fully become the other. They love each other like brothers, but they are moving in different directions. At the same time, Major Bunny Colvin creates Hamsterdam, one of the most important arcs in the whole show. Colvin is tired of meaningless drug arrests. He knows the war on drugs is a performance. So he quietly legalizes drug activity in abandoned areas, moving the trade away from normal neighborhoods. His logic is simple. If the police cannot stop drugs, they can at least reduce the damage. And for a while, it works in certain ways. Corners become quieter. People in regular neighborhoods get some peace. Police are freed to focus on real crimes. Health workers can reach addicts more easily. But the idea is politically impossible. Once the higher ups find out, they do not ask whether it helped. They ask how bad it will look. That is crucial. The system does not judge reform by whether it works. It judges reform by whether it can survive public exposure. Amsterdam is shut down. Colvin is forced out. The city buries the experiment because admitting it worked would mean admitting the old system was fake. That is one of the clearest statements The Wire ever makes. A solution can exist, and the system can still reject it because the solution threatens the story the system tells about itself. The Barksdale story also reaches its breaking point. Stringer gives up information on Avon to protect his business future. Avon gives up Stringer's location to brother Malzone and Omar after learning Stringer had D'Angelo killed. Their betrayal is mutual, but it does not feel equal. Stringer's death is the end of a dream he could never actually enter. He wanted to step outside the street, but the street still claimed him. Avon is arrested soon after. The Barksdale era ends not because the city is saved, but because one organization loses its place. Marlo Stanfield is waiting to replace it. Season 3 is about the failure of reform and the limits of ambition. Stringer cannot escape the street by copying businessmen. Colvin cannot fix policing by being honest about it. The city cannot accept a truth that would embarrass too many people. Everyone sees the problem. Almost nobody can afford to say it out loud. Season 4 is the strongest and most painful season because it turns to the children. By this point, the show has already shown the police, the drug trade, the docks, and politics. Now it asks where all of this begins. The season follows four boys, Michael, Namond, Randy, and Dookie. Each one is standing at the edge of a different future. They are not symbols first, they are children first. That is why the season hurts. The show lets us see them before the world fully hardens around them. Namond is the son of Wee-Bey. He acts tough, but much of it is performance. He has been raised around the image of the game, but he does not have the nature for it. His mother pushes him toward the street because she wants to preserve the status that came from Wee-Bey's name. Namond is not innocent in a simple way, but he is still reachable. Michael is different. He is quiet, guarded, and already carrying serious pain. He does not trust adults because adults have failed him. When his mother's boyfriend returns, Michael feels threatened in a way the show does not over explain, but makes clear enough. He turns to Marlowe's people because they offer protection without asking for vulnerability. Chris and Snoop solve his problem, and that act pulls Michael into their world. He becomes a soldier because the only people who respond to his fear are killers. Randy is social, clever, and entrepreneurial. He could probably do well in a better environment, But one mistake, one rumor, and one failure by the police destroy him. After he is labeled a snitch, his foster home is attacked, and Miss Anna is badly injured. Randy ends up in a group home, hardened and abandoned. His story is one of the clearest examples of institutional failure. He tries to cooperate with adults, and the adults cannot protect him. Dookie is gentle, poor, neglected, and almost invisible to the systems around him. Prez tries to help him, and for a while, school gives him some stability. But Dookie is moved along even though he is not ready. The school system does not have the space or patience to save him. By the end, he is drifting toward the life of an addict. It is not dramatic at first. That is what makes it worse. He just slowly loses the few things holding him up. Prez's move from police to teacher is important because it gives the season its most direct view of the school system. Prez wants to teach. He cares. He improves. But the school is overwhelmed by poverty, trauma, testing pressure, and political neglect. The children do not arrive as blank slates. They arrive carrying the city with them. A teacher can help, but a teacher cannot undo everything outside the classroom. Bunny Colvin returns through a special program designed to reach kids who are already being pulled toward the street. His work with Namond matters. Namond is eventually taken in by Colvin and given a real chance at another life. That is one of the rare hopeful outcomes in the show. But the fact that only one child is saved is also the point. It shows that rescue is possible, but not scalable under the system as it exists. One person can save one kid. The city keeps producing more. While this is happening, Marlo Stanfield becomes the new dominant force in West Baltimore. He is colder than Avon. Avon cared about reputation, territory, and a certain street code. Marlo cares about power in its purest form. He wants his name to mean fear. Chris and Snoop hide bodies in vacant houses, making murder disappear from the city's official numbers. This is important because it connects the street to the police department's obsession with statistics. If the bodies are hidden, the murders do not count. If they do not count, the city can pretend things are better than they are. Bodie's arc also ends in season 4. Bodie was introduced as a young soldier in the Barksdale organization. He killed Wallace. He survived by accepting the rules. But under Marlowe, even Bodie sees that the game has changed. There is no loyalty, no structure he recognizes, no room for someone like him. After little Kevin is killed, Bodie understands that he is disposable. He speaks with McNulty, not exactly as an informant in the usual sense, but as a man who has finally realized the game he served has no place for him. He is killed soon after. Season 4 is telling us that the system does not start ruining people when they become adults. It starts early. It sorts children before they understand the rules. Some are pushed into violence. Some are pushed into addiction. Some are punished for trusting the wrong adult. Some are saved only by luck and individual intervention. The season does not ask why these boys make bad choices. It asks what choices were ever really available to them. Season 5 brings the story to the media while also closing the arcs of the police department, politics, and the street. It is the season about narrative, who gets to tell the story, who gets ignored, and what lies become useful. The police department is suffering under budget cuts. Carcetti, who became mayor after promising reform, is now trapped by his own ambition. He wants to fix Baltimore, but he also wants to become governor. When the school budget crisis threatens his future, he chooses the politically safer path. He does not become evil overnight. He becomes what the office rewards. That is how The Wire handles corruption. It often looks less like a dramatic fall and more like a series of practical decisions that slowly erase the original promise. McNulty, frustrated by the lack of resources for the Marlowe case, creates a fake serial killer targeting homeless men. It is one of his worst actions. He manipulates deaths, stages evidence, and turns human suffering into a tool for police funding. Lester joins him because he wants to catch Marlowe and believes the case matters enough to justify the lie. The disturbing thing is that their plan works. The department gets money. The media pays attention. The city suddenly cares because the story has become sensational enough. That is the point. Real murders in poor neighborhoods did not create urgency. Hidden bodies in vacants did not create urgency. Children being destroyed did not create urgency. But a fake serial killer story does, because it is the kind of story institutions know how to use. At the Baltimore Sun, the show follows reporters and editors dealing with a shrinking newsroom. Some still care about real reporting, but the institution is under pressure. Scott Templeton fabricates details and eventually builds his career on lies. The tragedy is not only that he lies, it is that his lies fit what the system wants. They are clean, emotional, award friendly stories. The truth is messy and harder to package. The lie travels better. This connects directly to the rest of the show. The police fake numbers, politicians fake progress, schools fake improvement through testing, newspapers fake clarity. The drug trade hides bodies. Every institution learns to survive by managing appearances. On the street, Marlowe's rise continues, but his victory is empty. He has Prop Joe killed after using him to learn about the Connect. Cheese betrays Joe. Slim Charles eventually kills Cheese, not as a grand act of justice, but as one of the few remaining gestures of old loyalty in a world that has mostly lost it. Marlowe gains access to power, but he does not understand the larger world any better than Stringer did. He gets money and a chance to leave the street, but he still wants his name to matter on the corner. In one of his final moments, he steps away from a business gathering and confronts young corner boys, proving that what he really wanted was never just wealth. He wanted the street to know him. Omar's final arc is also important. After Butchie is tortured and killed, Omar returns to Baltimore for revenge against Marlowe. But he is not the unstoppable figure he once seemed to be. He is injured, isolated, and moving through a city that has changed. His death is sudden and undramatic. Kennard, a child, kills him in a corner store. The show refuses to give Omar the mythic ending the audience might expect. That is honest. In the world of The Wire, even legends can die small. The street may remember him, but the system barely notices. His body is almost mixed up at the morgue. The gap between myth and reality is brutal. Bubbles, however, gets one of the few real redemptive arcs. After years of addiction, grief, and survival, he begins to recover. His story does not become easy. The show does not pretend recovery is a single emotional breakthrough, but it allows him progress. He speaks honestly about Sherrod's death. He accepts help. At the end, he is allowed upstairs to eat with his sister and her child. That small movement matters more than any fake institutional victory. It is not the city being saved. It is one person being allowed back into life. The ending of The Wire is built around cycles. McNulty is pushed out of the department, but Sydnor begins to resemble him. Daniels leaves rather than keep corrupting himself for political numbers, while Carver becomes the kind of police leader who might carry some of Daniels' better qualities forward. Michael becomes the new Omar, robbing drug dealers with a shotgun. Dookie becomes the new Bubbles, falling into addiction. Marlowe leaves the game officially, but cannot emotionally leave the corner. Carcetti rises. The police department continues. The schools continue. The paper continues. The drug trade continues. That ending is not hopeless exactly, but it is not comforting. It says people can change, but systems usually do not. It says individual decency matters, but it is not enough to repair a city. It says the same roles keep being filled because the conditions that create those roles remain untouched. So the full story of The Wire is the story of Baltimore teaching everyone what they are allowed to become. Avon becomes a king because the street has room for kings. Stringer tries to become legitimate and discovers that legitimacy has its own criminals. Frank Sabatka breaks the law trying to save a working class world that has already been left behind. Colvin finds a practical answer to the drug war and is punished because the answer is politically unacceptable. The boys in season 4 are not born doomed, but they are born into systems that make escape rare. Carcetti begins with ambition that looks like reform and ends up protecting his future like every politician before him. The newspaper is supposed to tell the truth, but it rewards the story that sells itself best. The police are supposed to solve murders, but they are trapped by stats, careers, and chain of command. The show was trying to tell us that failure is not always caused by a lack of intelligence, effort, or morality. Sometimes failure is built into the structure. Sometimes a person can see the truth clearly and still lose. That is why The Wire feels so honest. It does not flatter the viewer with a fantasy where awareness fixes everything. It shows people understanding the problem and still being unable to move the institution around it. But it also does not say people are meaningless. That would be too simple. Bubbles matters. Colvin matters. Prez matters. Daniels matters. Omar matters. Wallace matters. Even when they cannot change the whole city, their choices still carry weight. The show is careful about that. It does not confuse the system is powerful with people do not matter. People matter deeply. That is why the damage hurts. The Wire is ultimately about a city where every institution has learned to protect itself from the truth. The police protect the numbers. The politicians protect the image. The schools protect the test scores. The paper protects the story. The drug trade protects the power. And beneath all of that, real people are trying to live, work, raise children, survive addiction, keep a family together, or just make it through the day without being destroyed by a game they did not create. That is what the show was saying all along. The tragedy is not that Baltimore has no good people. The tragedy is that it has good people everywhere, and the machine still keeps moving.